Hello everyone, welcome back to the fourth chapter of our Angular course. This is Ishan and you are watching Programming with Ishan. Today in this chapter we will be discussing about a very crucial topic, that is how components in Angular interact with each other. You must know that when you are creating a real world web application, there will be so many scenarios where you need to make interactions between different parts of UI. The data flow between them has to be very effective for your applications to be dynamic as well as responsive. So in this chapter, we will discuss multiple ways of doing that communication between the components using Angular. Okay, and this will include the topics like communication between parent and child component. Then we will discuss about the child to parent communication. We'll also discuss about how two sibling components can interact with each other. Plus, we will also check the concept that is called as the broadcasting techniques in Angular, which includes concepts of RxJS like subject, behavior subject, and also we will be checking how we can do that using the event emitters. So this is what we are going to cover in this chapter, and by the end of this chapter you will be having a very clear understanding about these concepts and you will be able to apply them on your Angular application. So without any further ado, let's get started. Yes, components do interact with each other, and it is really important for them to interact in a modern web application for those applications to behave in a dynamic and responsive way. You may think of a scenario where a single component becomes a source of data for the rest of the components, and there may be a scenario where two sibling components need to share some data with each other for both of them to be in sync. Plus, they need to update their parent component for the parent component to know what's happening in these two sibling components. So there are many scenarios where we need Angular components or UI components to interact with each other in a web application. Let me show that to you with the example so that it makes the understanding more clearer. Okay, so let's consider you have a staff component in your Angular application which is responsible for fetching some data, fetching the staff data specifically from the backend server, and also responsible for passing those data to the child components. Let's say we have two child components. One is a staff list component and the other one is the add or edit list component. Add or edit staff component. Now staff list component is responsible for showing the list of data coming from the staff component in a tabular manner, and the add or edit staff component is responsible for adding a new staff to the database or editing the existing one in the database itself. So now let's see how the interaction is happening here. So the parent staff component is interacting with the child staff list component to pass the data which it fetched from the server using a @input property in Angular. And let's say we have a refresh button in the staff list component, so on click of which we want the latest data to be fetched on the staff component. So when you click on the refresh button, the @output property and event emitters are used for staff component to know that a refresh button has been clicked and it needs to call the API again. Similarly, the staff list component and the add or edit staff component needs to interact with each other. Say you click on a row in the staff list component, like on a single staff row, and when you click on it, you want a pop-up to appear where you can edit the existing details. So that pop-up itself is a add or edit staff list component, the other component, right? Now for that component to know which row was clicked on the staff list component, either you can use the shared services or the state management properties. So this is the another way of communication where siblings needs to interact. Now once a new row has been added, like a new staff has been added on the add or edit staff component, or a detail has been updated, in that case also your parent component needs to know that okay, something has been changed. Now I again need to call a API to get the latest data. So that interaction needs to happen from add edit staff component to the parent component. So that is how all the components are interacting with each other. Okay, so let's start implementing all the techniques what we discussed in the previous section of this chapter regarding the component interaction, starting with the parent to child component interaction in our first Angular app project. Before to that, guys, this is important for you to know that I have moved the profile and user component inside the pages folder for having a better structure in our application. Going forward, whatever components we'll be creating, we'll create that inside the pages folder itself, right? And also we will be using Bootstrap in our application. Bootstrap is a front-end framework which provides predefined classes, so it becomes very easy to design and have a responsive and dynamic website created. So we'll be using that, and to use that you can either download it using npm install, or else you can use the cdn references in your index.html file. That's what I have done here. I'll be pasting these links inside the in the captions, so you can copy and use the same on your application as well. Now coming back to the parent to child component interaction, so let's create the staff components which we discussed. So we will be creating one staff component that will behave like a parent responsible for getting the data, and we will not be getting the data from any API source, but we will just use a hard-coded array of object which we will be passing to the child components, and for that we will be creating two child components. One is the staff list component and the another one is the add-edit-staff component. Staff list component will be responsible for showing the staff data which is coming from the parent component in a tabular format, and the other component, that is add-edit staff component, will be responsible for adding a new staff or else editing an existing detail of the staff in the database. So that's how it will work. So here we are not going to edit that in database, we will just do the same in the object which we have in the parent component. So that's the plan. Now let's create the components quickly. I am adding the staff list and add-edit staff component inside the staff folder itself to have a clearer understanding of parent and child segregation. Let me also start the application in parallel. Okay, so now we can see we have added the staff component here, and inside the staff component we have the add-edit staff and the staff list component. Okay, so now let's add a array of object variable with some hard-coded data, and then we will try to pass that to our child component. Okay, so we have created the staff data object. Now the next job is to actually create the connection between the staff component and staff list component. So for that purpose, let's open the staff components HTML template. And we will have to get the selector of our staff list component and use the same in the staff component, that is the parent. We can verify if the connection is created or not in the browser itself. Okay, we missed to add the staff component route in our app routing file, so let's do that first. Okay, so this should work now. So you can see, even though I am opening the staff component, because the staff route is linked to staff component, we still can see staff list works. Staff list works is the text which we can see in our staff list component. So that means adding the selector like this creates the parent-child connection successfully. Now let's try to pass the data, that is staff data, from parent to this child. For that, you will have to define an input property inside the staff list component.ts like this. This input has to be imported from Angular/core itself. Okay. Now what we can do is we can actually use that as a property of app_staff_list tag and pass the staff data variable to that property. Okay. Still we are seeing the staff list works because we have not added the table which is required to show the data there. Let's do that as well. These classes what I'm using are the bootstrap classes. I'll show you how they make a difference in a moment. Here to use the array of object in our HTML template, as we cannot use the array directly, so we have a built-in directive that is ng_for, *ng_for, which is used to create multiple tags or multiple, in this case multiple rows, the TRs, for the given number of objects inside an array. Okay, so it will iterate on top of that array. The syntax is like this: let item of this dot staff data, and this item represents each object inside the staff data array. So we can access the value out of that object using this interpolation like this. Fine. Let's just check the output. So we can see we are having the ID, name, position, and the values which we added, but the table doesn't looks good, right? So let me show you what difference the bootstrap class makes. So I added this class table and you can see everything is properly aligned and having a proper space between each of them. So these are the predefined classes, and that's how it helps you to make the application very easily. So this is all about how you make a parent to child component interaction. Just to summarize what all we did, so we created a staff component wherein we defined a hard-coded object, that is array of object with these three values, and in the staff list component we created an @input variable as staff data to get the data from the parent, and this selector app staff list is used in the parent component as a tag, and we are passing the data from the parent using this input property we created in the child component. Once we fetch the data, we are showing that on our table and the job is done. So this was all about your parent to child component interaction. Let's now check how we can make an interaction from child to parent in the next section. Now let's try to understand how we can make a child interact to its parent. And as we discussed in the previous section, where we wanted a refresh button to be added in the child component, and on the click of that refresh button we wanted our parent component to refresh the data and send it back, right? So for doing that we will have to use an output property. So let's do the same in our staff list component. Herein we will add an @output property, which is imported from the core itself. And let's keep the name as onRefresh. This will behave like an event for the parent. So how we have the click event, mouse over, mouse enter, all those kinds of events we have. Similarly, we are creating one event kind of property, that is an onRefresh, which will be actually a new instance of @EventEmitter. That is also imported from the Angular/core itself. We'll give this of type boolean. That's it. And let's write a method here. This method onRefreshClick will be called when a user will click on the refresh button. So for that, let's add one refresh button here as well. We forgot to give a header as well, so let's do that also. Okay, now we will have to add a click event here, on the trigger of which we need to call our method which we created in the child component. Okay, and in this method we will have to write a simple logic which will emit a value for the event output property which we created. Let's add that value as true. So this onRefresh event, on click of the refresh button, will emit a value of type boolean which is true. Okay, now this event has to be handled on the parent component. So for that we will have to add the same as how we add a simple events, like we have this click, right? Similarly we will be adding onRefresh, which will be an event specifically raised by this child component. And here also we will have to write one method refresh data. And for now let's do one thing. Every time this button has been clicked, we'll pop the last object of the array. Let's see how it behaves. And yeah, one more thing, as we passed a true value from the event in child component, right? So to get that value, what you can do is and from here we can pass it as $event. $event will take the value whatever is being passed from the onRefresh event from the child component. And here we can add a check if required in your logic, if event equals to true, or else you can just keep event like this. So if event is a valid value, true the value, then do this. Okay, now let's see how the results are coming. One second, let's make it justify content between. These are flexbox classes from Bootstrap, which helps to apply the flex style. So now we have a refresh page. And how about we make the complete div as of size colMD7. Right now we have it as 12. So 7 will, this colMD12 means the screen is getting divided into 12 parts. So when I assign colMD7, it means that this div will take the 70% of the screen. However, the divisions are being done by the bootstrap classes. So you can see, right? Now if I click on refresh page, see our data is getting popped out. If I click once more, so that means we are able to connect the child to the parent. Whenever the child is raising an event, parent is handling it and working on top of that event. So just to summarize what we did, we added a new div tag wherein we have the button calling the onRefreshClick method. OnRefreshClick method is responsible for emitting a true value for the onRefresh output property, which we added in at the top of the file. And afterwards we are handling this event in our parent component like this by calling a method on the trigger of onRefresh event, and inside the refresh data we are just popping out the staff data details. So this is how you can make a child interact to its parent, and you can write the logic based on the interaction or event which is being fired from the child. Now we will see how we can make two sibling components interact with each other. So let's quickly check how we can make two sibling components interact with each other. In our example, we have the addEdit staff component and the staff list component, which we'll be placing in the staff component.html to make them behave as the sibling components. To show the interaction, we will be having a form created in the addEdit staff component, in which we will be trying to add a new staff or edit an existing staff. The moment we click on the submit button to add a new staff, that staff data should be visible in the staff list table as well. And to make this interaction, we'll be creating a shared service. So before creating the shared service, let's quickly add the addEdit staff component in our staff component.html, that is the parent component. Let's copy the selector name from the addEdit staff component file and paste it in our parent component HTML as a element. Fine. Now we can see that addEdit staff is working fine here. So the next step would be to add a form inside the addEdit staff component HTML. So for that we will be adding a div inside which we will add the form tag with a class form, and I'll be using the bootstrap classes. Herein we will be creating two different groups. One for username, the staff name or name, and the other one will be for the position, and we will also have a button in here. So here the class for input type would be form control, and yeah, I have made a mistake here. This div class colMD12 form control actually will be form group. So let me first change that part as well. Now we'll do the same for the next input type. So we can see two input type columns have been added in our page. We will also need to add labels for these input types. So for the first one, let's keep it as staff name, and we'll copy and paste it in the below one, and we'll keep this one as the position. Let me correct the spelling for the label. It is label. Yeah. Now we can see that the label and the input type columns are visible on our page. The next step would be to add a button for submitting the data. We'll be using the bootstrap class, that is button and button-primary. We also will create an event here
So not create, actually we'll use the click event, and on the click of this button we will call this onSubmit method. So let's add this onSubmit method. For now let's keep it empty so that it doesn't throw any error, and we'll keep the name of the button as submit. So we can see the button is available on the screen. We'll move it on the right side so that it looks better, and we'll also give some margin at the top. This should be fine. Yeah. So we have created our basic form now, and let's give a header for that also. Add staff details. Now the next step would be to add a style, which I already have added. So I will use the same class for making the form look more presentable. And we will also have to create two new variables, that is for staff name and position, to hold those values. So for that purpose, let's add a variable in our component.ts file. The first one as a staff name, and the second one as the position. Here let's keep position and staff name as an empty value because of the type string we have assigned to it, and we will use these variables in our input tag with the ng model. That is the way of providing two-way binding in Angular. So this is how you assign a variable. So every time the variable value changes, the change will appear on the input column, and vice versa. I mean, if the input value changes, the variable will also change. So that's how two-way binding works in Angular forms. Before proceeding ahead, actually we should check if these two variables are able to get the value from the input column or not. So for that purpose, we'll have a piece of code in the onSubmit method. We'll add a temp object with the keys as name and position, and we'll assign the staff name variable and position variable to these two keys for checking the values. Okay, and we'll also add a debugger at the top. Now we'll add some values in the staff name and position, and we'll open the developers tool, go to the sources tab. In the sources tab, once you click on submit, you will be able to see the debugger is working fine, and we can see the staff name and position variable is having those values. Now the next step is to create a service. So we'll be creating a shared service file. You can use ngGenerate command also, but I am doing it manually. So let's add a @injectable decorator with the key as provided in, and we'll be injecting it at the root level. So we'll give it the value of root. We'll also export the class, and we'll keep the class name as a shared service. We'll be adding a constructor afterwards. Now this service will have two methods, one for getting the staff data and another one for the setting of staff data. So we'll create a get staff data method, and the another one will create it as a set staff data method. Set staff data method will be called from add_edit staff component. Okay, now we'll add a variable here, that is staff data of type any, and in the get staff data, in the set staff data, we'll pass a parameter as the staff data, which will be passed from add_edit staff component, and here we will assign this value to the this.staff data variable of the shared service, and in the get staff data we will return the staff data variable. So this is your service for sharing the data between two components. Set staff data will be added in the add_edit staff component. So let's do that quickly. So before to that, we will have to instantiate the shared service. So we'll add that in the constructor like this, and we'll use this .shared serve, the variable which we have used for instantiating the shared service, and we'll call the set staff data method, wherein we will be passing the temp variable. And in the staff list component, we will be using the get staff data method. So if I simply write get or say fetch latest staff, some method, you can use any method name up to your choice. Before to that, let's first instantiate the service here as well. So private shared serve and the shared service. And now in this method, I can write this dot staff data. Sorry, this dot shared serve dot get staff data, and we will have to assign this to something, right? So what we will do is we will do a this dot staff data equals to this value, or else we can take it in a temp and then we can push it into the staff data. So it will keep on adding as a row, right? It is an array of objects, so one new object will be added in the existing array. Now if we try, so debugger is working fine. We did the setting of the data, but you can see that the get staff data did not call, right? The get staff data did not get called. Why? What's the reason? Because our staff list component doesn't know that when exactly the submit button was pressed on the add staff details. So now for that purpose, what we can do is, let's write a set interval method inside the ng on init, wherein we will give a time interval of say 100 milliseconds or something, and here we will write the this dot shared serve dot get staff data. Actually we will do the same thing what we are doing on fetch latest staff directly into this one, and we'll check if the temp is having some value. Then in that case we'll push that value to the staff data array, and after that we'll just set the staff data again as a null value, so that even though the interval is running, that set interval method keeps on running, still we will not get the invalid values. Now if you see, and if I click on submit button, we'll be able to get those values in the staff list table. See, that's working fine, right? So this is how you can communicate between the sibling components using a shared service. You can see the ID here is missing, so what we can do is in the staff list we can add a index variable let I equals to index, so we will be able to capture the index of each row, and here in place of item.id we can actually use the index value. So index starts from 0, so I am keeping it as I plus 1. So now every time I add the new staff data, it will be added with a new index for Ishan staff. If you add something new, so like this. So but the basic concept is, this is how you actually share the data between siblings using the shared services strategy. So just to summarize, we added a form in the added staff component, wherein we are having this on submit method. We added two variables, and in the on submit method we are setting the staff data using the shared service. In the shared service we are having these two methods, get staff data and set staff data. Now in this get staff data is being called in the staff list component inside a set interval, so that it keeps on checking if any change happens in the staff data variable of the shared service. And finally we are setting it as null once the value is received. So this is how your sibling component interaction works. Now the next thing we will check is the broadcasting technique, so let's get into that. Now let's quickly check the event emitter first, and we'll create a variable staff data em just to denote event emitter variable, and we'll import the event emitter from angular/core of type any. Next step is to create a method. That method will actually send updates to whichever component listening to that event emitter variable. So let's keep the method as send staff data update and pass staff data variable as a parameter to that. Inside this method we will be writing this dot staff data em, that is your event emitter type variable, and will emit the data coming from the added staff details, that is the staff data. This method we will be using in added staff details component. Just for your information, this will send all the updates for the newly added staff data. Now this method we will be using in the addEdit staff component. Here let's comment this line number 22 which we were using earlier in the last example, and we'll write the shared serve dot send staff data update, and we'll pass the temp variable similar to how we did in the shared service strategy. Now we'll go to the staff list component. Here we'll comment the set interval method for now, and we'll try to subscribe to that event emitter variable. So staff data em dot subscribe. So when we subscribe to it, it's like how you subscribe to a YouTube channel. Every new update you get a notification. So here the subscribe keeps on listening to any change happening in that staff data em variable. So whenever the change happens, here we will get an update that something has changed, and based on that you can do the further process. So we'll check if res is having any value, and then we'll push that res result to the staff data. So now let's see how it behaves by adding a debugger, and we'll check in the console if it actually hits the debugger every time we are clicking on submit button or not. So if that's working, that means your broadcasting is happening fine. Now let's quickly add some values in staff name and position and click on submit. So we will be able to see the debugger is working here, and we have passed the temp object to the send staff data update, which would have called the event emitter, and here we can see the debugger inside the subscribe method has been called, right? So that means every time we are firing that event, we are able to listen to that event inside the staff list component subscribe method, and we were able to push the result inside the staff data array. So that's how your event emitter works for the purpose of broadcasting. So without using set interval and all, it just waits for any kind of change. Now the next thing is doing the same process using the subject variable and the behavior subject variable. Subject and behavior subjects are concepts of RxJS. There are other concepts also like replay subjects and async subject, but we will be limiting ourselves to these two only in our current chapter. Once we will discuss about the RxJS concepts, we will be discussing them in detail. So I have created a simple staff data subject variable, which is an instance of a subject class imported from RxJS. We'll keep the type as any, and here also we will be creating a method that will be responsible for setting up the values for the subject variable, which will be passed from addEdit staff detail component itself. So let's keep the method name as set subject staff data, and herein we will be having this dot staff data subject. But before to that, let's add a parameter to the method first, and now we can use this dot staff data subject and pass that parameter, but using the next method. So here to update a subject variable, we will have to use a next. For the emitting of event, we were using emit, so you need to remember this. Once you do that, it will also create an observable. So here first let's comment this part and add this dot shared serve dot set subject staff data and pass the temp object to the same. Once you do that, it's like we have passed the object to our subject variable, and here also we will be commenting this part and rewriting the same kind of method, that's this dot shared serve, but at this time we will be listening to the staff data subject variable and will subscribe to it, similar to what we did in EventEmitter. So every time a change occurs in our subject variable, we will be able to listen that in the staff list component. See, it's still working, right? And similar to this, we also have this behavior subject RxJS concept, so we will be using that also for the broadcasting technique. So let's quickly add a variable, something like staff data behavior or behave equals to new behavior subject. So we'll instantiate the behavior subject class with the any variable, and here there is a difference. So you need to actually initiate this class with a value. It can be null, empty object, or any value which you want. So you can put 2, but it is not relevant here. So let's put an empty object, and now we'll write the same kind of method like how we did in the subject. So something like set behave staff data, and we'll pass the parameter that is the staff data variable. We'll just copy that and paste it here itself, and here we'll change the staff data subject to staff data behave, and we are done with the setting of the behavior subject variable. And in the added staff component, we'll comment the subject one and we'll write the behavior one. It's the similar syntax. And going back to the staff list, let's comment this one and add the similar subscribe method for the behavior subject variable. And we'll push that result into the staff data. Now you will see a difference here. If you see in the list right now, there is an empty row added. That empty row is because of the object which we initiated it with, the behavior subject, the empty object, right? So in case of behavior subject, it is able to read the previous values also, but in subject it always takes the new values, right? So that's the actual difference between them. So let me do the initiated with a null value, and now we can add the staff name and position, submit, and it will work as it was working with the subject variable. So this is how you perform broadcasting using these kinds of concepts. So we discussed about EventEmitter, we discussed about subject, we discussed about staff data, replay subject and async subject, these things. There are other ways also, like you can also use ngrx, that is a state management strategy. That is a whole different concept itself, that we will have a different course on that. But these things also exist and we will be discussing them in upcoming chapters. So we have covered most of the concepts which are important for you to understand how component interaction works.
Thank you so much for watching the video, guys. If you really enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe our channel and join this amazing community for getting more exciting updates. Also, we have launched this new group, that is Stack Master Full Stack Dev, on LinkedIn. So you can connect with us there as well. You can connect with other people there and get latest information on full stack development. For more information, you can check the description below. See you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.